Breakout Shot, Chapter 7. God Plays Dice. Keith was seated at a table with a group of men and one woman, and the woman sat at the center of the table and dealt the cards out clockwise, one at a time, with a flick of the wrist, each card pitched directly in front of the intended player. Her name tag said Cherry. The men and Cherry the dealer, all with chips in front of them, mostly red-colored chips, and Cherry the dealer had chips of all colors, lined in rows. A player placed money on the table, and Cherry counted it out, then placed the chips out in front of him and took the cash with a smile. Her white teeth were like crisp, new-fallen snow. "Thank you, Cherry," said the man. Keith folded and folded and folded his cards, hand after hand, tossing them into the muck. He watched the players, staring at them, sometimes staring for too long and getting glared back at, all the while listening to the chaotic clicking of chips shuffled together in half unison. He never distracted himself from the sound. He could feel the pulse of it in his veins, all around the primal pulse of cruelty, like the smell of blood in the air, metallic, as if all was floating in a red haze, and fear and the denial of fear were all there, behind the smell of sweat in the cold air. The world felt frozen in time, in a pocket of repeating measure. The time would move forward, and with it would come a moment for him to pounce. But for now, he waited. One night, a few years back, a homeless man had come into the casino. He wore a moldy sweater and told the table he lived under a bridge. He checked his cards and called a bet with his pale and thin hands, oily and smeared and black under the nails. "You believe that?" the man asked Keith. "Believe what?" "That I live under a bridge," said the man. "Yeah, I believe it," said Keith. In the end, Keith took all of his money, the same as he would anyone else. The man had left the table and looked at him with lifeless eyes from across an unintelligible void. The hope in his eyes, maybe he could win, double his money, get something started, was lost like blood swirling in hot running water, down the drain, then vanishing clear. The action was on Keith, with Cherry the dealer pointing at him, and he was pulled from his mind and back into the game. He covered his cards and flipped them back and looked down at two red aces. He looked at them with a quick flick. Most would look too long at a good hand. He could see a light up of the eyes. They loved their cards. The eyes would give them away. Interest in the pot. Keith would notice. He would watch them as they looked, one at a time as the action circled the table. He stared at them. He gauged their reactions across a span of time. Something was stirring in this one, he thought. A sudden interest rising out of the boredom. Someone ahead of him said, "Raise." The players called the raise around the table. It came to Keith, his mouth ajar and his eyes shifty. "Re-raise," he said. It folded back around to his opponent, a young man wearing glasses. "All in," he said. "I call," said Keith. "He calls," said Cherry, pointing to the man, and each turned over their hand. Cherry smiled and knocked on the table. "Full house," she said. When the game was over, Keith went over to the cage and stepped up to the counter. "Cashing out," said the young woman behind the counter. Her tone encouraged him to reconsider on behalf of the house. "Yes, thank you." She began to count the chips out, putting them into even rows of matching colors, red and green and black and white. 972, she counted out. "Looks good, thank you." She put the money through the cash machine, and it whirled as it counted the bills. Then she counted out the cash in front of him on the counter. He thanked her again and handed her the $2, and he walked off towards the exit that led to the garage and walked along the rows of parked cars. He got in his car and started the engine and drove up the casino drive, with the casino behind him and the lake water stretching away into the horizon. He pulled onto the ramp, building up speed as he merged onto the highway. He was going to go home, but then on his way he changed course. He went through the downtown and out to the west side of the city and parked his car near the green room instead. He watched the door, but nothing happened, and he stared and stared at the scuffed door under the green awning. Tomorrow, holy shit, he said to himself. Darby stood in the entryway of the casino poker room and watched the tables. The room was illuminated in a chandelier splendor, and the slot machines rang and sang all through the room. He went and stood near the tables and watched the gambling on the outcome of cards, the room full of action and the sound of talking and cards shuffling. Then he was standing behind the old man he had followed into the green room. "How's the action at this table?" he said. The old man looked startled. "It's good, I suppose," he said. Then Darby was leaning in close to the old man's ear, his face nearly touching the wide hat brim. "I'll kill this game when I get into it. Don't you worry," said Darby. "I'm going to play like a maniac. It's going to make you sick how I play." The old man struggled to turn and look back directly behind him, but Darby was already gone, now talking to the floor man at the front desk. Soon Darby was seated at a nearby table. The old man adjusted his hat and looked over. Darby was grinning at him, and he saluted the old man. "What the hell is the matter with this guy?" The old man looked up at the ceiling and down at the felt and around at the other tables, and he watched the baseball game on the televisions placed high up in the corners of the room. And when it was at commercial, he watched the commercials. He looked anywhere but Darby. Eventually, Darby's table broke, and he was moved to the old man's table. He came over to the table and dumped his chips into a pile and began to stack them. He stood there stacking his chips for a moment, and he looked at the old man, and the old man looked away. Cards were played, and everyone was quiet for a long time. The silence was viscous, and time moved slowly. Darby and the old man were in a hand together, and Darby checked, and the old man put out a bet. Darby stared at him. "You remember me?" said Darby. "Where from?" The old man looked afraid. "We played together before at the green room." "Sorry, I don't recall," said the old man with the white hat. "Do you think God plays dice?" asked Darby. "Come again?" "I said, do you think that God plays dice? Do you think it's a gamble? Do you think he knows how it's going to turn out, or is God taking some risk?" "Why are you asking me for?" "You look like a man of God, and if you were a man of God, I'd ask you again, does God gamble? Is there something at stake between him and the devil? Can God create a game he can lose at?" The old man was silent. "Well, are you?" Darby said. "Am I what?" "A man of God." The old man stared at Darby for an intense moment, his eyes like dormers under the gable of his brow. Darby folded, and the old man began to collect his chips into a rack with his hands shaking. He would not look at Darby again. He stood up and leaned on his cane as he turned. "It was nice playing with you, sir," said Darby. The old man went hobbling out of the poker room and did not look back. Darby lifted the palms of his hands towards the sky. "Was it something I said?" No one looked at him. He continued to play poker. He ordered a gin and tonic from the waitress and sat back and watched the poker room. When the action was on him, he folded. He stared at an invisible point in the distance. His mind was elsewhere. When the drink came, he drank it. Then he ordered another and drank it. He rattled the ice and set down the glass and stood and collected his chips and went to the cage. The clerk behind the cage paid him out for his chips, and Darby folded the bills and stuck them into his pocket. He went out to the parking lot and got into his car, and when he started the car, it roared and purred low as he rolled the window down and backed out. He took a cigarette from the soft pack on the dash and lit it, the lighter flame glowing orange in the darkness, as he drove out of the parking garage and turned out onto the road. He turned up the music on the radio, and the drums thundered, and the sky overhead was clouded and low. It did not cross his mind whether he had won or lost as he drove into the night. He drove and stared into the headlights, cutting through the thick darkness ahead.